Hi, everyone on Instagram. All right. So I am very excited for this conversation because one of the things that we are so committed to doing here at the Land of End is finding the voices that need to be lifted up or who have, in my opinion, the ideas that might be able to propel us forward. Because certainly we're short. Anything that we've been doing in the past has theoretically not been working, although Aisha might challenge me on that. Aisha is talking to us from Berlin, and she is a former Afghan youth representative to the UN. She currently is studying law and public policy, or you completed your law degree. Is that right, Aisha?
Well, I almost completed, which is a completely different story. We can
Well,
talk.
we want that story. We want that story. So tell us that story, and then I'm going to ask you the hardest questions about how we're going to save our species in like 10 minutes. So give us your full background, and everyone will quickly realize why you're here.
Um, okay. So I will start with your introduction. I am the first female Afghan youth representative to the United Nations, and I grew up in Afghanistan. I went to high school, primary school in Kabul, and then I started studying law and political science at Kabul University. And I was about to graduate when Taliban took over, and I had only 2 months for my graduation. I was working on my thesis when government collapsed, and I had to flee Afghanistan for my safety. And I left with nothing, no documents, and almost no clothes to pack in my suitcase because it was an emergency flight from Afghanistan. And I came to Berlin. Initially, I came to Stuttgart in Germany, and I was looking for opportunities to continue my education. And that's how I found an emergency scholarship in Berlin, and which was specially designed for Afghan students at the time. And then I came to Berlin and managed to transfer some of my credits from Kabul University, which I had only the screenshot of in my phone. And I'm super glad institutions like that exist, which are very, very few, that show so much flexibility in emergency situations. So I could graduate from my bachelor's in 2 years, and then at the moment I'm studying public policy.
Okay, we're going to come back to all the things you're continuing to do, but I need to back up like 10 steps. So the world watched as Kabul fell. And I think everyone has their own unique visions, images of like token photos of what was happening at the airport, what was happening on the tarmac, what was happening outside the airport. And it certainly felt like it was a period where there was not enough oxygen in general. Um, um, as everyone was watching this, and it felt very not confusing, but unsequenced, and it was hard to understand, frankly, what was happening. When you say you had to leave for your safety, and only if you're comfortable talking about this, Aisha, we all have a very ignorant understanding of what safety might be and look like for somebody like you. It's very, I would, in some ways, shape or form, argue it's like a little bit of a propaganda sort of narrative about women in the region. But can you tell us about what you're comfortable talking about related to your safety being jeopardized? And then I need to understand how this one screenshot of your resume or of the classes that you took ensured that you were able to step into this next opportunity, because that's like mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, it was mind-boggling to me as well at the time. But beginning with what safety meant, the day the government collapsed, we all slept under a sky that was filled with evacuation flights and heavy planes taking military and I mean, the military withdrawal happened before that, but also everything that remained and the evacuation that was happening. So it was a sleepless night, but we woke up to the sound of gunfire in my street. Taliban came door to door searching for anything that so-called belonged to government, perhaps vehicles or weapons, or they were searching every house, and they ended up also searching our house. And at the time, there was also this risk of any single girl being married to a Taliban militant. And that was the biggest fear for a lot of families, and most of them wanted to send their girls to safety, perhaps to a neighboring country. And then there was also a lot of fears about them not having their rights under Taliban regime, which is the longer term fear. But the immediate term fear was girls being safe from getting married to Taliban foot soldiers. And for me personally, I was very outspoken against Taliban. I spoke at the United Nations Security Council in 2019 during the peace process, and I advocated for women and girls' rights, but overall for young people's rights during the peace process. I was quite politically active, and there was this general fear that Taliban will still target political
Voices.
activists and figures, and that was
Were
exactly.
you mostly vocal abroad, or were you also vocal at home?
I was mostly vocal at home because I was Afghan youth representative to United Nations, but my main job was inside Afghanistan. So I was traveling around provinces, talking to young people, collecting their voices, bringing it back to share that with the government, with the international community, with UN. And I think that at the time I was the first female Afghan youth representative, so it became quite a topic in social media, which I was quite surprised about because it wasn't the case for the first Afghan youth representative. He was a man. So I think that in itself, like you being a woman and you having that sort of a role in itself, was quite an attraction for a lot of people in Afghanistan, and became quite a contradiction. And that's how my social media view also went up, which was the upside of it. But on the downside,
Wait, where did you start getting all your followers, on like TikTok or Instagram, or how'd that all play out?
mostly on Twitter, because I was quite active on
Okay,
Twitter,
okay.
criticizing government and system and everything. But I think that's where I also received some messages from Taliban when I give my UN Security Council speech.
Can you
And
clarify exactly what that means?
so they heard my speech
Mm.
because it was, of course, about the peace process. And they mentioned that you should have been more critical of the international community, and a lot of other things. But I was seeing that they watch my content, they're following me, and they are attentive of how we are representing Afghanistan on global stages and how that impact them and their picture, because everybody was trying to showcase Taliban as the so-called transformed Taliban who changed, who might not bring the oppressive regime back. So they wanted to make sure that the peace process will end up selling that picture. And I think us contributing to them not necessarily being the so-called transformed Taliban on the global stage in statements was quite a concern for them. And yeah, I think overall that was also part of the reason I received a lot of. I wouldn't mention the countries, but were countries concerned about political activists who might be targeted, and they were sending me messages and emails that you have to leave the country, and if you want, we can help you. So I think it was a chaotic evacuation process happening at the time, quite mismanaged in a lot of senses. But I didn't leave from that route actually through evacuation flights, but still, I think there was a lot of concern generally for political activists.
Okay. There's so much story there, obviously, and there's so many folks, and I want to invite anyone who's on Instagram, Substack, YouTube, Twitch, wherever we might are, to feel free to post questions. This conversation could end up just with you telling us like every ounce of what you're willing to share about your evacuation process and how you ended up where you were. And I want to hear all of that. And I also think there's an opportunity for your specific life experience to help us understand what somebody like you has seen and knows about world organization, particularly. And this was a idea that really stuck with me is you've obviously advocated on behalf of peace building, peacekeeping, and ensuring that women's voices are heard. I have like a multi-dimensional question, so I'll fumble through it and you can answer it however you would like. The first one is I have spent a lot of time recently talking to women who are either still living in Kabul, who I know they are all friends of yours. I know you know all of them, or who are living between Kabul and Dubai or Kabul and London, and how they talk about how they engage with the Taliban and that there's like this performative layer of engagement um, in order to continue to try to protect more women. But one of the universal sound bites that I hear, and I'm curious to know if this also resonates with you, which is how angry Afghan folks were and potentially Afghan women were around how the West and Europe, the global North, described or used the fear around protecting women as the reason why to invade and control, which when you say the Taliban wanted you to be more angry toward the West or foreign countries, did that have something to do with it, that they felt like they were inaccurately characterized? Was that your observation, or was the way that the West had described Afghanistan as it applied to women accurate?
So, if I'm getting the question correctly, the frustration of women with the international community.
Oh, it looks like her screen froze. I assume she's going to try to jump back on. Basically, some of the concerns and frustrations that I've heard from folks has been rooted in how much propaganda was peddled toward the West. Not that it was necessarily inaccurate, but that it was so rooted just in women's rights. But yet it was the international community that was coming in and saying what women's rights actually needed to be. Let me see if I can find her verse letting folks like Aisha drive. Give me a minute. Hold on. I'm trying to find her. Give me a sec. I don't know where she is. There she is. Hi. I don't know if we can hear you. Try saying something again.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
so sorry. I guess it was my internet issue.
It's
I'm not
totally
sure.
fine. It's totally fine. All right, let me rephrase the question. It's totally fine. Like I said, it's a very casual space here. So, given all that you've gone through, what gives you hope that the world can be reinvented differently? And what are sort of your concerns about, like, big blind spots that we might not know about, right? Like, because if the way that the West had created these stories around what was happening in Afghanistan or wasn't happening in Afghanistan, or if they were really truly reflective of what women or marginalized individuals wanted, it was just a very Western perspective, story, action, all the way out until the last minute. Last minute, you didn't even grab a piece of paper. If we're going to reinvent the world, what are you both hopeful about, and what are your concerns about what we might miss again?
Um, what I'm hopeful about is the strong will of young people still in Afghanistan, because I've seen it since I left the country that they still keep dreaming, especially young women, and how hard they are trying under all these restrictions to access internet, and through internet access education. And I think once you get the taste of freedom through education, which we
Mm,
did to an extent in Afghanistan in the past 21 years, I think that taste is still sweet for a lot of young people and they want to experience it again. And I think it's even true for young Taliban foot soldiers who want to feel what modernization, what freedom and what safety could look like, which their leaders could not provide till this very day. So I think I've had my criticism of the international system, the global system, to speak generally, um, eh, since the peace talk started. But it's easy to lose your faith on the global system that we have created since World War II, after what
mhm.
I've seen in my country and what I'm seeing till this very day, and especially the mockery that we made out of international law right now with what's happening in Gaza. Um, and I think it's easy to lose faith, but I believe in people and young people and their will to still change and still hope and still get educated. And I think every day I'm hoping that I will wake up to the news of Taliban's fall. But of course, it wouldn't happen overnight. Of course, I'm not waiting for another military intervention to get us rid of them. But the only intervention we have to make is to make sure that we get Afghan girls and Afghan young people educated through any means in order to make sure that that fall will happen and we will be able to experience freedom and democracy in the truest sense, not what we had over the past 20 years. What I'm concerned about is talking about transformative systems, but not having an honest conversation. Because when we talk about situations like Afghanistan, we always talk about saving women there, saving young people there. We are not subjects of programs or projects. And I think it's important to start realizing that the international community should work with us, not save us and work for us. So I think this sort of mindset shaped a lot of things in Afghanistan, which then eventually led to a very fragile system there in every sense that was very prone to collapse like a house of cards at the end of the day. So I'm not worried just about Afghanistan facing the same sort of failed attempts for rescue again, but a lot of conflicts are emerging every day, and we are seeing the same failure being repeated from the international community to respond effectively. And that's my biggest fear, to see this failed system not fixing itself, but repeating itself while adding some patches to it from time to time.
I really appreciate that, and I would love to dig a little deeper on that, only because I feel like this is where this is a very clear lane for a new opportunity. So, can you tell us a little bit about how the international aid system had worked in Afghanistan for 20 years, and specifically how it was propped up on a deck of cards or a house of cards that was naturally going to collapse? And as we're sort of wrestling with the idea that USAID has been the rug has been pulled out from under it here in the United States because of Trump's um, cuts. So there is a new opportunity to think about not just aid, but what it is that we can do to listen and sincerely exchange currency, because maybe it's not an actual financial currency, maybe it's a like, what would new aid, new allyship look like, either both in Afghanistan or internationally, now knowing that we have a clean slate a little bit?
Yeah, I think the idea of aid in itself is to persist the suffering uh, that exists. Because yes, we had development projects and also sort of intervention in Afghanistan combined with the aid itself. However, as I mentioned, like aid, it created that system of dependency to
Yep.
perpetuate. And it wasn't even not only true for example, receiving food packages and basic means of survival. It also was true for very existential fields of education, because, for example, in engineering or other fields that were quite essential to the future of Afghanistan, the real transfer of knowledge and especially supporting students in that field and creating that system that can actually lead to the natural growth of the country by educating young people. It was actually also not established in the way it should have been, because some students and I would say most of the students who received scholarships and who could get education in other countries, they were then absorbed by those countries, and Afghanistan couldn't really benefit and reap the benefit of them being educated in those fields. And the infrastructure was built in a way that would perpetuate the dependency. And I think the important aspect of any sort of development intervention in situations like Afghanistan that was emerging from Taliban's rule since 2000 or 1989 was that to ensure we're working with people based on the needs that they have and ensuring that whatever we are building is actually helping them to sustain. And that element of sustainability did not exist. I would say it wasn't just an international system failure, but also a lot of corruption existed within the government of Afghanistan, which also then led to those sort of failures to creep in and to find its place. So, yeah.
Can we identify a couple of other examples on how foreign aid came into the country and then ultimately made those intended beneficiaries dependent on the foreign aid? There's one terrible, shallow example that I can think of, and I know you can think of. The list, it's a filing cabinet deep. But when again, some well-intended Westerners came in and said, "Oh, there's such beautiful garments and there's such beautiful art in Afghanistan. Why don't we export some of those handicrafts or that art or that culture?" Well, at some point, like, that becomes entirely dependent on someone who's gonna export it, and then entirely dependent that somebody in Boston or Berlin is gonna buy the object. So it's like well-intended collaboration, but doesn't really come to fruition. Or I've also heard stories of um, aid coming in and being incredibly siloed. So you'd have one nonprofit that was working on women's health and distributing menstrual pads. And then you had an entirely separate nonprofit that was trying to get more children into classrooms. And then you had an entirely separate nonprofit that was working on food distribution or aid distribution, and that there wasn't this like cohesion across them. One, I know that's the intention of the United Nations and large agencies, but they're like pretty archaic, in my humble opinion. But then you have, you know, the international community, and then you have my favorite acronym, Mongo's, my own NGO, where you have individuals who are like, I'm going to pull up my bootstraps and jump on a plane to Kabul and see what it is that I can do to help. But as a consequence, when everyone pulled out, there wasn't thriving businesses that enough women owned, that the community or the country still needed to depend on. The engineering, water filtration, like, you didn't have an engineer that you could call to help fix a local problem. Um, but it is really interesting to hear, and I've heard so many ideas, not so many, but again, those like voices that are still on the ground are like, it is all about female entrepreneurship. It is all about helping women build their own businesses and controlling their own capital, and how they're trying to figure out ways to do that, a little bit under the radar, but like also playing publicly like, no, of course, they're employing so many men who need to be the ones to take care of their families. But it just strikes me that how do we move forward with aid, whether it's in Gaza or Sudan or even like, parts of Eastern Paris? Like, how do we show up in these non-siloed ways that have a little bit more of like a larger infrastructure that allows more cross-pollination, because it's all obviously so connected?
Yeah, I think uh, you mentioned some great examples, but it started from the government budget to healthcare to education to everything, because it was built on this sort of resource control by the donors, and then setting the agenda for how it should be then spent, but then along the way also allowing room for corruption to creep in. So when you were talking about female entrepreneurship, I had flashbacks of one of my trips with one UN agency that I traveled with across Afghanistan
Oh no.
for for um, I mean, it was in honor of celebrating International Women's Day, talking to women in different provinces. But I've noticed something really important because for decades, the international community was blaming Afghanistan for the fact that they have poured billions of money, but it's still unable to stand back on its feet and to you know progress to the point that it should, considering how much they have
Right.
already
Right.
spent.
Right.
Um, and then I noticed a very important sort of loophole in this whole argument.
Oh no, I'm like waiting with bated breath. I know my head's gonna fall in my hands when you're
So
done.
it's
Keep
quite obvious.
going.
I'm sure you already know because um, the money that is claimed to be spent on Afghanistan is not solely spent on what is exactly needed by Afghan
Yeah.
people in order for their progress. It's also spent like the majority of it on the salaries and vacations of UN officials. And you can then imagine it for other sectors and agencies and institutions that were involved in the development projects. Because when I traveled with this agency to 4 provinces, I noticed that a lot of money was spent on the way to make sure that those panels and events are organized. And the money was spent so that some of the UN officials and people who already have access to the international community, like some activists, can talk there for a couple of minutes about cliche jargon stuff. Um, and then the women that were supposed to be consulted with and should have been heard are just the audience. And at the end of every panel, we had a handout of the common, agreed upon points as a request or like kind of proposal to the international community by all the women that they should sign. So the funny thing was that paper was already written.
Mm.
Instead of us creating that together with women there in each province, and then they were supposed to sign that, um, and within a very short period of time. I don't think they even got the minute to read it. um, and then also seeing that we are talking in Herat about Afghan women's role in technology by spending perhaps thousands of dollars on that panel instead of actually contributing that money to ensure that the uh, girls who are studying code, the girls who are studying robotics actually get the money that they need in
Right.
order to
Like
get
maybe just
educated.
buy more batteries.
Exactly. And when I learned how much was spent on that tour, I think it's great that UN is visiting those provinces, but the real engagement, the real contribution wasn't there, that was needed for girls to actually feel that they are heard, that they are empowered, that they are invested in. And instead of us talking to them on how important it is to study technology, science, math, STEM, everything, we should have actually shown the importance of it through investing in it. And I haven't seen that. And I think most of the things that we are selling as an image, and especially now that I'm seeing with Afghanistan's issue, girls' education, it was a headline when it was announced. It was a headline when the international troop withdrawal happened. But when their politics and international communities focus shifted to other conflicts, and then the politics were the priority, then we stopped our feminism and human right at the point at the exactly the point where our politics started. And I've seen this with a lot of countries, and that's not solidarity, it's actually branding. And this happens a lot with crises, and then we try to yeah, brand, and to make sure that we are showing our solidarity and our stance for certain values, but not actually meaning it because another crisis happened or my politics do not support perhaps engagement with Taliban at the moment. But it kind of justified my engagement when I wanted to withdraw my troops. So I think this duality and double standards, it existed from the very first day, and we tried to play blindfolded just for the hope of peace, and
Yeah.
it's disappointing.
Are you scared that's happening again in Gaza?
Well, I would say worse things are happening in Gaza. I, I'm speechless about how the international community is watching a genocide unfold right before our eyes, and in silence, just watching it. And I think also with what's happening with the international law at the moment and the mockery that we have made out of it is quite scary,
Hmm.
because that means a shift in the world order, which I don't think would be better than what we had before.
Okay. I want to walk down this particular path on international law. So, Aisha, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your academic experience with international law. What did you specifically study within that massive umbrella of subjects? And then also where you see an opportunity. I'll add that as somebody who has also studied it, not in a formal capacity, but I worked at the UN for years and I'm very well versed on like the ICC. And like I really understand a lot of it in great nuance and also have this deep belief that nobody respects it. It might be my bias as an American who has not my country has not ascribed to any of those conventions, and therefore so that we can theoretically never be prosecuted for them. But they don't carry a lot of weight, or they don't carry weight enough. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background, where it is that you're heading in the field, and then do you think there's an opportunity for us to not reinvent it, but give it more gravitas?
Oh, well, I would say, first of all, disclaimer, I am not an expert in international law.
It's fine.
Started my
I want your opinion
bachelor,
anyway.
I started my bachelor in international law for 5 years ago or 6 years ago when I was in Afghanistan. So I think my interest in UN also stemmed from that, and I was also participating in ICJ moot court sort of simulations to learn more about that. And now knowing that we have a very strong case before ICJ against Taliban was also something that made me quite hopeful. But at the same time, which was started by which is supposed to be then presented by Germany and a couple of other
I
countries.
didn't know that, actually.
Really?
I didn't. Can you tell
So
us a little bit about that?
you know
And
about,
maybe not use acronyms like ICJ and just say it for those who
I
in
see.
the back of
Okay.
the room.
So you know about the ICC case against Taliban?
So the
Uh,
ICC is the International Criminal Court. It's based in The Hague,
yes.
and the idea is that it's a court of justice that all countries in the world ascribe to. So if there's a dictator, or if somebody commits a large scale action that the rest of the world wants to hold them to account to. But the only way that you can be tried in the ICC is if you have essentially joined the club, and there's like 4 countries in the world that haven't joined the club. Brace yourself, it will be shocking when I tell you one of them is not the United States, because of course they don't want any of their actors to be tried in the ICC.
Correct. Yes. Sorry, I didn't
It's
describe
okay,
what
it's fine.
you. So they have issued arrest warrant against Taliban leader, which was quite a positive news, and I made me quite hopeful. But I mean, it's also symbolic because we know that Taliban leader, whose face nobody saw so far, would
Yeah,
not
I
drop.
don't even think I know a name. Like, I
Uh,
don't know a name compared to, like, I know a Joseph Kony in Uganda. I know a Ben Gvir in Israel. I know, like, I don't even think I know a name.
so he's called Haibatullah, but nobody actually saw him, and that's the scariest part of it all because you don't know where all those rules and regulations that suffocate your freedom and life are coming from. But it's coming from a man that you cannot even see and, of course, let alone interact with. So, in the case of ICJ, a couple of countries that are interested to present a case. I am not sure where it went, how far it went so far, but Germany is one of those countries that wants to present a case for violating CEDAW, which is a convention for protecting women's rights, that Afghanistan violated CEDAW, and they want to present that case before ICJ, International Court of Justice, which is one of main branches of UN to bring
By the way,
Taliban.
I'm trying to Google this gentleman, and it's like breaking ChatGPT. ChatGPT is like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So he's
Really?
that hidden.
Okay.
Oh, no, I found him. I found him. And they just brought this case to the ICC in this past July.
Exactly. I was actually with a group of Afghan lawyers and law experts and human rights activists, together with the Justice Initiative of Open Society, who actually initiated the process of International Court, Criminal Court
Oh,
to.
I've seen him before.
Yeah, okay. But nobody saw him in public, and he
Ah,
is not appearing anywhere. So that's just a picture. Nobody knows if that's actually him, and if he's actually somebody alive and a human being
mm.
in charge of uh, the Taliban regime. So that's the picture we have seen and the name that we know. But apart from that, everything seems to be secret. So yeah, with the international law, the arrest warrant of the leader was quite something, quite a big news for a lot of Afghan women. Quite, I mean, I would say it's still symbolic, but
Yes.
but it's a big step
Yes.
in one sense, um, and I think there's also a lot of question about how would you bring them to International Court of Justice, and would um, take them accountable for a convention that, I mean, even though they inherited another, um, another government's decision, but still they do not by default want to subscribe to a convention that they haven't signed and respect, and think is important to the survival of the regime or the government itself. So there's a lot of questions about that. But
Aisha, why did Germany bring that case? Like, and I'm asking a terrible, very superficial question. What's in it for Germany to bring that case?
well, it was a coalition of 5 countries. It's not
Okay.
just Germany. So if I'm not mistaken, it's Netherlands, Canada, Germany, and 2 other countries that I forgot at the moment, but I am not sure how far it went. Um, the case is not brought before the International Court of Justice, but they were in the process of gathering all the evidence in order to make sure that they present a strong case before the International Court of Justice. And I think this comes from for example, for Germany, it comes from their feminist foreign policy. It comes from their strong stance for women, peace, and security. And as a consequence, there's also Afghan diaspora in Germany that is pushing the government to respond to the situation of women and girls in Afghanistan. And so this coalition is working on bringing this case before the court, which will also make the path towards recognition for Taliban quite complicated and eventually impossible. So from what we are seeing at the moment, they're contributing quite well to their non-recognition in the international community by doing what they're doing in Afghanistan, by increasing the bans, by increasing their human rights violations every day. But I think even from a symbolic sense, I thought it was quite a important gesture of solidarity for with Afghan women. It's absolutely not enough. On the practical sense, we have to make sure that we go beyond,
Yeah.
the bigger picture.
Reinvent the ICC for me. Reinvent it from scratch. And I just put the 6 countries that brought the case to the ICC in the chat. But and as I'm skimming this, it seems like nothing can happen until they actually have, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Habitullah and Abdul, that they can't try the case until they have them in custody. But
Yeah.
does this feel like, this is where I get cranky. I stand by the ICC. Like, I bleed UN blue. I'm not technically wearing UN blue today because of that statement, but like, I stand by the conventions. I stand by the charter. One of the fascinating conversations we had with somebody from Tunisia in this specific space is how we decolonize a lot of the language of a lot of the charters, which we're going to do that here on Twitch. And I'm very interested. I have so many blind spots when it comes to language. So I stand by all the institutions, but Aisha, like, that headline didn't break into my orbit, and I pay attention enough. The ICC has barely successfully tried any warlords. 2, maybe, like Serbia and I think that's it. Well, there's probably another one, but I can't remember. But like, how does the international community actually wield the power of shame? Because if courts like this, the objective is like both preventative, right? Like, if you mess up, you could go to the principal's office or you could go to the ICC, like there's that as a controlling function. I appreciate that. But it's also the court of shame. And, to me, that's what a lot of the Western male leaders are pushing up against today. That's where, like, we had these very big protests in the United States this past Saturday called No King's Day. Many millions of people. And the next one, there's going to be double the amount. And Trump is responding with like these terribly embarrassing memes of like him pretending to be like, it's really getting under his skin that like the power of shame is extraordinarily powerful. But I wonder, is there another way for Jenna and Aisha and all of the other people who are aligned with us to use the power of shame against people instead of going through the old stodgy processes of the ICC and the ICJ? Is there a new thing that can be invented?
I think the new thing that could be invented is to actually turn these institutions into what they're actually meant to be. What was the reason we created them? Actually, we lost the meaning of institutions and values that we claimed to hang on to so tight after the World War II for the New World Order. And I think the justice should not be only for the poor countries. And we have seen this. I mean, also the United States, as you mentioned, is not a member of International Court of Criminal Court. So whatever war crimes they have committed in Afghanistan or anywhere else would not be then brought to justice. And that double standard allows space for a lot of
room,
immunity, and whether it's political or criminal. And I think redefining ICC and recreating institutions is it's both taking a lot of time. We will be investing in new concepts, new ideas, and then coming up with something probably similar. But it's not about reinventing, it's actually going back to the roots of what those institutions were meant to represent. And I think we went on very wrong directions while trying to, I think, apply justice through these sort of international tribunals, because the real meaning of international law is kind of thing lost between um, politics and also the big powers agendas, because at the moment international law's biggest problem is that it's not binding, and when it's not binding and big powers like the United States can actually stay immune and receive impunity for any political or military misconduct that they have in any country, in itself is making the trust towards international law quite weak for a lot of other countries. So I think if I would reimagine international court, criminal court, it would be not a distant court in Hague that is kind of taking this case on behalf of women, but actually bring justice also to Afghan women at home, making it more tangible, making it not symbolic, but an actual act of protection. Because I think Afghans at the moment, they don't need trials happening on
Yeah, who
international
cares? Right.
law, but they want that acknowledgement and dignity that has been lost to restore, and that happens also through ensuring that Afghans on the ground have access to justice, through accessing their basic human rights. And I think that can even happen while you have Taliban in power. We do not need to stick to this excuse of Taliban being in power so we can just sit back and watch gender apartheid unfolding in Afghanistan and watch how brutally women are treated in their own country. So I think, I mean, it's great to have this case before ICC, but it doesn't mean that this is the only way we can ensure justice, which doesn't even seem tangible for a lot of women in Afghanistan.
Is there, you mentioned something that I think is, it's very heavy to me. And I also know it can carry potential weight. You mentioned being acknowledged and being seen. Um, that again, like what's a verdict at the ICC going to actually do to making sure that like women have freedom of movement or speech or education or prosperity? Is there something that either I personally or American women or women worldwide can do to acknowledge Afghanistan women in ways that you think might be dignity fulfilling?
Yes, definitely. I think when we talk about Afghan women, as I also mentioned before, it's usually as subjects and receivers of aid and projects and
Like a political chess piece. Yeah.
exactly. So it became that brand where you where you want to invest your charity, and then and ensuring that picture goes out and you are seen as a person who is pro women rights and human rights. And I think this has been the case for the past 20 years in Afghanistan. So part of it was real contribution from the international community, which was on schools and education, which brought me up. And I grew up in that Afghanistan, where schools were rebuilt, education for women was provided, and I'm the result of that too. And I think the acknowledgement start with the fact that those countries involved over the past 20 years, but also involved in how mismanaged the peace process was, and eventually the unconditional withdrawal of the troops was, acknowledged their mistake. For some of them, they had, parliamentary processes, looking back at the lessons that they should learn and then moving on. And I think that was kind of hurtful for me, which the process started perhaps in other countries too. We had it in Germany, where they wanted to learn the lessons from what went wrong in Afghanistan, so that wouldn't be repeated in another crisis, which it's obviously happening again in the crisis right before our eyes. But making a mess, and then coming out of it, looking at it, drawing few lessons on a piece of paper, and then saying our job is done and we have evacuated a couple of people who worked with us and our responsibility is over, is creating a huge precedence for immunity down the history. And I think that's quite dangerous precedence for us to set. And I think acknowledging would come with knowing that those people who are working, like, for example, I'm working at the moment. I don't have the resources enough to do this, but I'm trying to find ways to ensure that girls in Afghanistan will have access to education through innovative means, like, technology, online classrooms. But there is no acknowledgement of the urgency of delivering education in accredited form, which reduce the significance of education emergency compared to the significance we have given students of Ukraine by the programs that were created and platforms that were created. I can also see it in Germany. And that acknowledgement do not exist for the situation in Afghanistan. It's seen as a humanitarian crisis, but that a humanitarian crisis that will eventually be solved through a political process. So at the moment, we will accept it as normal. We will accept it as it is. But I've been trying to get that solidarity from universities, from institutions, to work with me to create and design programs that we can then deliver to the specific situation in Afghanistan. We think of technology as something that's free as and expand access, but we have had so many deadlocks because these technologies are designed for the people who can access them and not designed for people who have to use it in hiding in secret in situations like Afghanistan. And I think that lack of investment in seeing and acknowledging the urgency of it and sufficing with words of solidarity and symbols, I think is the only thing that is left, which is also reducing quite a lot because the focus is then shifting. But I think working practically on solutions that can ensure girls and women have access to their rights, starting from education, is important, and everybody can contribute to that, starting from
Okay.
you as well.
Great. So tell me what that technological logistical hurdle is. If we can theoretically accept that the World Wide Web has a ton of content that would be beneficial and helpful for children in crisis, particularly girls. What's the biggest hurdle technologically to get them access to that? And then what's the hurdle in creating unique classrooms for them that are specific to them?
Well, the most obvious one, and one of them that recently emerged, which I was quite shocked about, but nothing to be shocked when you have an oppressive regime like Taliban in place. I was always saying to institutions and international community that, unlike Iran, where we have certain platforms banned and that are restricted, we do not have that sort of ban in Afghanistan, and internet still exists. My grandma from a very far village in Afghanistan is sending me a WhatsApp text or voice note. So we can use and leverage technology to make sure that, whether it's through their mobile phones or tablets or laptops, we are able to reach girls and educate them. And then Taliban's complete blackout of internet was a shock to my core, because I could also not reach my family, and that was quite stressful. But then it also made me think of finding thinking about resilient ways of accessing internet, which then makes it quite costly. So the immediate term logistical hurdle is also accessing internet, which is not always affordable, especially thinking about resilient ways through satellites. So we can.
No, when you're talking about this, I'm like, okay, if I can get a Starlink series of satellites to go over Eastern Afghanistan, like I'm
Yeah.
very thinking like that. So
Yes.
is that the hurdle though? It's not like we could reposition Starlinks over the country, is it?
Well, there are a couple of blockades to that as well. First, Taliban considered it illegal. Anybody who is caught using Starlink would be punished. And second, Starlink's intervention, Starlink in a country also requires some sort of agreement on the government level, which would not happen under Taliban regime. However, there are other satellites as well that people can use. But overall, I think using satellite internet, which we are currently exploring on what shape and form it should be, which satellite service it could be, where we do not face that sort of eventual, perhaps, situation with the de facto authorities in case we get caught. But also thinking of resilient ways of ensuring access and continuity of access to internet, ensuring device-related issues with students' access to online classrooms, ensuring that we also have offline classrooms for students designed in situations like Afghanistan, where the blackout, electricity blackout, can happen
Right.
quite a lot.
Right.
So there's a lot of logistical concerns, but we have tried this in 2023 together with UNESCO on the ground and one other US-based university. They provided accredited degree courses, and we tried that out. In Afghanistan, we provided power banks to make sure that they have access even if there is a blackout. We provided tablets to students, and they managed to get their transcripts after the semester, and it was quite successful. It needs resource investment, but it needs acknowledgement that we have to work on a system that bypass the physical bans and restrictions. Totally practical and designable and possible. In case we actually acknowledge the urgency of it. And another thing that I noticed was most universities and institutions are um, quite reluctant to step their foot in and commit to it, because they are afraid of safety of girls in Afghanistan, which is quite understandable. What if they get caught that they're studying at this university? They should not be the reason why a girl is persecuted in Afghanistan. And I understand that. But I also think that's an easy way out and a very comfortable excuse to use, while those girls are telling me that they are willing to risk their lives to
Right.
continue education, and so far there's no evidence of girls continuing their education online being persecuted. But they're
Is
also
that is that because the Taliban doesn't know? And then also, it's really interesting to me, Aisha, like, it sounds like this accreditation piece is really, really key. Like, the actual confirmation that you did the class or that you got the diploma or that you went through the program seems like it's a really, it's not just like watching a TED Talk and, like, learning about.
yes. And so far, I guess a lot of institutions that are delivering online classes in Afghanistan, most of them are non-degree, non-accredited programs. And I think that is not acknowledging the urgency of the situation, because the peak of Afghanistan's progress in the past 20 years was Afghanistan's, um, um, you know, reach to that level where Afghan girls could study in higher education institutions. And those girls should be rescued in the most um, um, efficient way. Because, for example, if we continue providing non-accredited programs, that we are actually undermining the significance of what that loss of education can do to women and girls in Afghanistan. I do not want to say that education and its value is dependent solely on a piece of paper.
Mhm, mhm,
And we do not want those girls to also then study and hang a piece of paper on their
mhm,
walls. But that piece of paper in today's world can take you a long way. And one of the things that we are also considering is that acknowledgement and recognition from an international institution or university will help them to also reclaim their financial stability through
mhm,
innovative alternative means, because they need skills, they need uh, recognized degrees and credit to also get to what then we can say is a freedom
financial
way to,
independence,
yeah,
yeah.
through financial stability. So I think it existed in the case of Ukraine. A lot of ways were explored to make that alternative system of accreditation still in place. The system is a little bit different because the government cooperation existed. However, I think we have to acknowledge that for an Afghan girl to receive education and to receive a degree, the fruit of their efforts should be as equally important as a Ukrainian girl. And I think with a lot of universities, we don't see that, but also we can trace that back to lack of acknowledgement and investment of resources and creating programs like this for girls in Afghanistan. We have seen scholarships for Afghan refugees for the immediate term after the collapse. However, this sort of system or online accredited degree program do not exist. I actually worked with a German university, and they wanted to extend that degree program to Afghan girls. We have had this advocacy for a year, and eventually we got the green light. But the only problem was that they had to stick to German bureaucracy, which means girls need to have ACT scores from university, transcripts with certified copies that need to be posted to Germany. First of all, girls who could not continue their education
Right.
in universities, they cannot reclaim their transcripts, and they can only do it through their mahram. And even with mahram, you cannot guarantee if they will get the
Sorry,
certification.
what's a mahram?
Sorry, I'm talking as if you
It's
already
fine.
know.
I'm flattered that you think I would know.
So mahram is like a male relative, whether it's your father, your son, your husband, or brother. So you can only reclaim it through one of your male close relatives. And even then, it's not guaranteed. So when we are asking these institutions to be flexible and realistic and practical, considering the situation in Afghanistan, um, they only come back with the reason that this is the law and we cannot bypass the law. And if laws are supposed to restrict us to the bureaucratic processes where institutions like that are willing to actually expand their programs to respond to a crisis are unable to do that because of the regulations in place and the policies of governments that have the resources to actually respond, then we are actually doing nothing um, to contribute to solving a problem like that, and we are just it looks good on paper to say that we have scholarship for crisis situation, but if you cannot actually deliver that, then it means nothing.
Right. At some point, this scholarship has to translate into some sort of currency for the student or for the person, and if they have to jump through all those loops. Um, Aisha, I have a couple questions just going back to the access of education. So if the Taliban is turning the internet on and off, and that seems like it's a recent thing, right? Like in the past, like 6 months or so. Is that right?
Well, it happened, the complete blackout happened 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
I would say 3 weeks ago, but it never had precedent.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay. So, and the blackout, just to confirm, and this is for my own edification, that was 100% controlled by the Taliban.
Yes.
And have they turned it back on?
Yes.
And how are they, I imagine it's the same thing that happens in North Korea. Like, I still like shake my head and like, how is it possible that Kim Jong-un in North Korea is completely keeping his citizenry away from the world? I know there's cracks in the system, but if we theoretically found a university to provide accreditation, and if theoretically students could only get accreditation at the university in the United States or in Germany or something along those lines, recognizing that they didn't receive accreditation in Afghanistan, but there's still some sort of like, yeah, but they say it's real there. And obviously I don't have my mahram, I think you called it mahram.
Yeah.
um it's still worth pursuing because there's like this temporary logistical stamp that doesn't exist, even if it's a headache to get. But what do you think the infrastructure would be needed to get? Is it tablets? I mean, do your grandmother, she's sending you WhatsApp voicemails, praise the voicemails from the elderly, on WhatsApp. They're my favorite. I do admit that I listen to them 2x speed though.
Me too.
'Cause it can be really long. Um, but like what else would we need to get to girls? Is it like actual tablets? Is it a satellite that we don't call Starlink? Is it like what would it be if I was like, "Okay, here's the box of things that you need. What would I fill it with?"
I think um, it's quite the basic stuff, but I would say with now that we have the internet back, I'm still connected with all the students that we give access to for academic English, so to prepare them for the university experience. And I think the important thing is to make sure the continuity of internet, whether it's through resilient means like Starlink satellite internet or any other satellite service. Um, but also then devices are quite essential. We have managed to make sure that girls have access to at least English courses. They had to download an app where we had the collaboration with an English app, and they had classes and then test in order to get their certificate. And then
And they're just doing that on the smartphone.
exactly.
So they downloaded the app. They still have electricity. I mean, again, every time there's an ounce of progress on our side, they'll find a way to meet it, but it's via the apps that they can download all of the content. So it's not like if we were to go on here and talk about, I don't know, best practices on delivering breech babies or something like that, of like whatever the thing was. This relies on live internet. But if there's the app that we like pound with a ton of content that they can download it when they have access to the internet, right?
exactly.
Like a
So
Duolingo is like that is are you familiar with Duolingo?
yes, I am. So I think one of the reasons we also provided this offline app was to prepare them for Duolingo test, which we received free vouchers for because Coursera and Duolingo platforms, they're also working on, providing access to these platforms in crisis situations, but they have to be online. So we had certain restrictions on that sense, but apps like that exist where you can access offline content and you can still complete your program and get your certificate. And I think developing those sort of apps for longer term and ensuring resilience of education delivery should be the key priority for UNESCO and generally the international community to invest in, considering how unstable the security situation um, is getting everywhere in the world. And I think one of the I mean, we have access to different other courses from some universities that they can take, like students can take in their own specific paces. I mean, they don't have to follow a certain
Yeah.
um, timeline, which also gives some sort of flexibility for us to make sure that girls will be able to finish their courses. But for degree programs, it doesn't exist. And for that, for the past project and initiative that we had, we provided prepaid SIM cards, power banks, and tablets so they can continue and they would be able to finish their education. I think these are the basic logistics.
Yeah.
However, time and again we receive comments like it's too costly, it's still dangerous, we still don't know if this will lead to anything. Um, but I think the biggest risk that we can take is not trying,
Mm.
because with the resources, I mean, even the minimum resources we have, we can save lives by giving them hope, by giving them a promise of the future.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And yes,
Aisha, is there so Duolingo and Coursera are showing up for you, it sounds like.
yes,
And what you need is actual money to buy SIM cards. And just for context for those who are watching, unlike the United States, where you buy a package of, or think back to like the late 90s, early aughts, when you had a certain amount of minutes on your cell phone plan. A lot of plans today don't have that kind of limitation, but that is a problem abroad. Um, I worked very closely with Sesame Street, and we were sending a lot of content to conflict regions in the MENA area. And we were sending short videos for people to download on WhatsApp about social emotional learning. So, about compassion or emotions or big feelings or whatever it might be. And of no surprise to anyone, it was a thriving program. And the people who were benefiting the most were not the 4-year-olds, but the 40-year-olds that were downloading the content. But the biggest challenge was enough bandwidth or technical like space capacity, not just on the devices, but within the plan. So the SIM cards from a financial perspective are really, really, really important.
yeah,
Um, and I'm thrilled to hear that Duolingo, because of course my wheels are spinning in my mind. I was like, I'm going to go to Duolingo today to get whatever it is that Aisha needs, but it sounds like they're showing up. there's also, and what I also think is really interesting as well, and this is where it's like just the new world is coming, like there's no stopping it, is that my kids also use Duolingo. They sit on that chair back there when I don't feel like dealing with them and doing my email, and they will do Duolingo. Although I did catch my son doing Duolingo English. English is his first language, but he just wanted to see what would happen if he got all of the points. So, but in terms of like the catering of these products to students, I'm a very photographic learner. My husband's a very auditory learner. Like these academic products can really meet students no matter where they are in the world, where they are and how they process information. So I appreciate your note of like, no, we just need like money to buy more SIM cards and more tablets, because there are people who are going to always be willing to take the risk. So if you need any more online education services, if you're looking for great math programs for kids, I have one that I'm happy to offer. If you're looking for more like early learning, early literacy, reading books, I will like go in, if there's a hole in your curriculum anywhere, I'm happy to get it. My relationships are more in the early learning space and not in the accreditation space. And I hear your message loud and clear. I have one crazy and likely very, very dumb idea though. It's a question. It's not an idea. It's a question. And Aisha, you let me know when you're tapped and ready to roll. You have generously given us an hour and 15 minutes. So you just raise your hand and say, I'm done. I need to go to sleep. But I do have one question I would love to ask you, which is if it's going to be a long-winded question, but I will try to find a common ground between you and I. So I live in the United States. I have a different set of rights here than other folks might in different parts of the world. And there are some similarities that are rooted in what it means to be human. And they are playing out very much within young men in power here in the United States, where their shame and their desperation to prove that they are more macho, or that they're living up to the macho myth, has them doing some really terrible things to their individual families, but also voting for people who are only interested in strongman theory and dominating other people. You obviously know exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to who in America is voting for what. But one of the things that we've been doing here at the Land of End is we have a series specifically focused on men. And I would love for those, anyone who wants to weigh in on how they have been watching that series and what kind of impact it's had on them. Where helping men who have been told they're supposed to be a certain way, that they're supposed to have a certain amount of control over themselves, control over women, control over money, control over companies, how that's a myth. And that if you don't check every single box, you feel pretty terrible about yourself. And one of the ways that we're helping them see how needed they are and how critical they are to the betterment of us collectively and helping all of us get free, if that's the business we're in, is helping them see their own humanity and their own vulnerability as being something that's really beautiful and needed. You had mentioned that even Taliban foot soldiers are interested in education and seeking education, and they also have hope for something better, and that they too might understand that this isn't the pathway to loving and being loved. Is there a way to get education and opportunities like that to them? Because if they are the ones that are holding the front lines against the gentleman that you mentioned who had arrest warrants out for their arrest by the ICC and the ICJ, is there an opportunity to do that?
Well, that's a very good question, because I had this deep belief that young Taliban foot soldiers do not necessarily subscribe to the agenda and the ideology. I mean, ideology is a very comprehensive set of ideas, but
They don't subscribe to what the story. Yes, I get it.
So, and I thought, because the main reason was, and most of the remote parts of Afghanistan, which is the 70% of the country, did not have access to education and work opportunities. And most of those villages also got bombarded, and the drone strike happened that also killed civilians. And from those villages, a lot of resentment and anger was going towards the government, the republic at the time, and also the international community. And that resentment gave space to Taliban to recruit young people, foot soldiers, to join them out of anger, not a certain ideology that could be necessarily, you know, as misogynism or, you know, being opposed to education and modernism. Because we have seen in the first ceasefire that happened during the peace process, where young Taliban had the opportunity to come to the cities and see normal people, civilians, see
Sorry, when
everything.
was that?
In 2020, and yes, in
So
2019.
during the first ceasefire, the Taliban invited men to Kabul to learn?
No, so that's a different story. It's not
Oh,
about
okay.
learning, but the ceasefire give opportunity for young foot soldiers to get out of that brainwashed sort of bubble and see also the other side of reality that they were fighting with blindfoldedly, like the civilians that were living on the other side of their reality, like us, the educated young Afghans, and young women. And I think there was some real connection, in terms of understanding that it does not necessarily represent what we are fed in terms of
Mhm.
the so-called enemy we have to fight. Um, and they are just like us. They have a better life because they have access to education, they have access to work opportunities, and that is attractive. And I want to be a part of that. And for the next ceasefire that happened, following that, those young soldiers were banned from going to the city and interacting with other civilians, because
Oh,
that's
because
exactly the point.
right.
And I've seen,
Damn, I
I
mean,
mean,
they're
so
just
many.
gonna play dirty at every single turn, aren't they?
Exactly. And I mean, they are young people. Young people want to have a better life. And you probably heard news that some young Taliban also joined the evacuation flights and got into
Yeah.
some of the countries. They
Well,
want to
I
bring
think that was,
the
like, the part that was confusing. It was like, who cares? I'm not interested in, like, the who's whoing, but
Mhm.
but I also don't know. I haven't been to Afghanistan. I'm dying to go. I hear it's beautiful. Um, but, I don't need anyone to tell me what these Taliban soldiers, foot soldiers think. I have a younger brother. I'm raising a son. I know, like, I'm bearing witness to what it means to be another human being on this planet. And there's religious stories and ideological stories, or there's just a show that we're all being sold. I mean, you and I are sitting here and you have beautiful eyeliner and beautiful mascara, and I also put mine on today too. Like, we all participate in different levels of performance, but we all know where the bullshit is.
Mhm.
We all know at some point our little girls might not show up with makeup on. We can't wait for them to have that kind of freedom.
Mm.
So, like, it was confusing then, but I couldn't really tell.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of, when you're an Afghan and know the nuances that goes into what leads perhaps a young person from a remote village to join Taliban, what could be the motivation, gives you a clear idea of where we went wrong. Because, you know, putting all the money into Kabul, educating just certain cities, um, big cities, important cities of Afghanistan, and then so-called important, and then neglecting the rest of the country, which can, constitutes 70% of your population, is living in complete deprivation. It eventually leads to resentment, and that resentment leads to them being part of an opposition.
Mhm.
And that has its deep roots in education. And the men that grew up with me, who were my classmates, they are completely different than Taliban foot soldiers
Mm.
in how they think, but they are nothing different in what they're capable of. And I see the same potential in a lot of young Taliban. They are not necessarily part of that ideology. They are not
Yeah.
necessarily violent. And if they had the right opportunity, if they were exactly at the place where I had the opportunity to access education, they would have been raised differently. And I
Correct.
thought when we started this online education platform, we thought of starting, of course, with women because they are the priority. They need to access education because of obviously the physical ban on classrooms. But eventually, we thought of expanding it, not in a very obvious way, but perhaps subtle way,
Yeah,
to
how would you do that?
a lot of other young men, especially also then creeping into
Right.
uh,
The
Taliban.
target demographics, we call it.
Exactly. So that natural integration of Afghanistan that needs to happen between the younger generation on the two sides can only happen through education. So I mean, the idea is nice. It needs a lot of support. It's also politically sensitive. For some donors or like people who might be able to give us the resources to make that happen, because they see political sensitivity in ensuring that in making sure that we perhaps can reach young Taliban. But that's definitely possible. And I think once we establish the trust between young Taliban and non-Taliban Afghan youth, which I wanted to do during my term as the youth representative. And I received, I actually shared this with the US Special Representative to Afghanistan at the time, who was also, I mean, the main character in the peace process. And he had a little, sarcastic smile on his face, and he was like, "That's a nice idea, but practically
It's the
impossible."
only idea.
Exactly. And I
It's
think,
the idea.
and the only peace for them meant power sharing, couple of old leaders sitting at the table pretending that the
Use best.
Taliban perhaps changed, and then signing a piece of paper that would not be translated into action because you actually did not integrate people on the ground who need to build trust after decades of mistrust and deprivation. And I think that sort of real peace did not, it wasn't actually the real concern for them,
Mhm,
and was
mhm.
the
That's
main
true.
reason we are in situation we are today.
Aisha, I would say that's still the concern. That's still I forget exactly how you phrased it, but that's still what's happening with the ceasefire in Israel and Gaza. It's not,
Mm.
it's just it's the same performance. It's not, there's no women at the peace building table. This will not last. This is not peacekeeping. This is just one administration wanting to take a victory lap. Um, I have another question for you if you're open to it,
Of course.
specifically on how, okay, great. So, um, yeah, one of the challenges in the US is that um, there's a couple of networks that like there's Fox and that speaks to the right, then there's MSNBC that speaks to the left, although everyone thinks CNN is sort of in that too. So you have like two very dramatically different news outlets or sort of buckets of news outlets. But one of the stories that's continually perpetuated here is that there's the elite demographic of people whose kids get educated or have access to power circles and their families can invest in their businesses, or and then there's the like flat out have nots and sort of the folks that have been um their only access has been to the systems, public education in rural areas, which is terrible lack of transportation, terrible lack of healthcare, food deserts with like nothing healthy. I mean, like the list goes on and on and on and on. And so there's been a real divide between, I would hate to boil it down and just call it class, but for simplicity's sake, we can call it class or access or privilege. Do the youth in Afghanistan, like if there's the Taliban foot soldiers that represent 70% of Afghanistan, who it doesn't even sound like have access to some of the basic systems. Like, how would the youth that have access to the online courses today, like, how do they where do they cross paths? How do they cross paths? Are they are they are they listening to same kind of, like, music? Are there, like, Friday nights where everyone goes to the town square? Like, where are those moments of crossing paths where seeds can be planted?
That's a very good question. And couple of things. First, just for the correction, so 20% of Afghanistan, I meant like our population is living in rural areas, so that do not necessarily represent like
The
all of
youth.
them as being Taliban.
Yes, yes, no, of course, I understand that. That's
Yeah.
clear, but thank you for
So
correcting it.
um, in terms of where they meet, one of the things that my mom told me when Taliban took over the city was that do not do not change how you clothe, do not cover your face, because they have to adjust to our reality. Afghanistan is not the same. We shouldn't hide ourselves just because we want to adjust to their
I
reality
love your
because
mom.
they came to the power. And this integration for them to come to the city, see a life growing out of what Afghanistan was 20, 25 years ago, was the initial point. A lot of young people got introduced to the idea of what is a cafe. Some of them went to cafes,
Mhm.
to restaurants that they haven't seen in other remote parts of Afghanistan and never thought would exist. And I mean, there are young people who can today perhaps enroll in a university. They can get an education, of course, the young men. I mean, now the opportunity is there, and the only thing we do not have is enough attention, resources, and plan to keep that part of Afghanistan that is educated and that is familiar with the idea of democracy and freedom to be protected and strong enough to stand
Sit at the
strong
coffee
on their
shops.
position. Yeah,
Sit at the cafes.
exactly, and not get swamped by a wave of you know, young people with different ideas taking over their reality and making them, forcing them to adjust to what those young people are familiar with. So I think if there was enough strength and support on the part of educated young Afghans, I think we would have been able then to confidently um, kind of pave the way for integration and sort of ensuring that we do not accept only Taliban as a reality, but they also accept us as reality, the transformed Afghanistan. And I'm very much afraid that with the loss of educated generation and letting them slide back to
Mhm,
the
mhm,
dark ages,
mhm.
we are risking the complete kind of submission of Afghanistan to that ideology again.
Right,
And I think the opportunity is still there. Young people are still there. They're still
right,
craving to be
right,
supported and
right,
protected.
right, 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 right. It was only 4 years ago, and I say, like, only, it feels like it was eons ago, I imagine, in some contexts, and there's still, like, a generation of folks like yourself who did benefit from the infusion of education.
Yeah.
Are there influencers? Who are, like, you know what I mean by influencers, right?
Instagram influencers, you
Yeah,
mean?
sure. Yeah, yeah. But, like, are there, like, Instagram influencers? Like, are there folks in Afghanistan that have currency and power independent of the government?
I mean, I would say I do not know personally, but I'm actually still seeing some Instagram reels and vlogs from young girls who do not show their faces, but they show their daily routine under the Taliban rule at the moment, and it's quite interesting. And um, I'm really inspired by their persistence and
On
make
TikTok, Instagram?
and Instagram. I'm not active on TikTok, so I don't
Neither
know.
am I. I think I'm too old for it.
So I think young people exist. They have access to internet, and they are documenting their lives. They're super interested to, you know, keep representing themselves, even
Mhm,
if they
mhm.
do not show their faces, and ensuring that they continue to have access to those tools is what we can contribute to. And I'm still not seeing that sort of um, consensus on seeing the urgency and significance of that. So I think, yeah, I mean, it exists quite
Will
rarely.
you send me some of those handles?
I
Some of those
will.
Instagram
Yeah.
handles, and I'll put them in the show notes. Do you think it's a good idea for Western audiences to follow those folks, or would that send up red flags to the Taliban?
Um, well, since it's public, everybody can see it. I think it gives you an idea of what you see perhaps on the mainstream in social media, and then kind of comparing that with how young people are also then representing that on the ground truth from their own lenses would be quite insightful into getting a real picture of Afghanistan and not just getting lost into that mainstream agenda of whatever news channel representing the situation. Um, I
But are the
think,
Taliban foot soldiers, are they following some of these young girls too? Or like WhatsApp chat, or is it WhatsApp Live? You know the lives that people post on WhatsApp.
yeah,
So
I'm not familiar.
I'm asking this leading question, like, are there influencers in country who could be used as the conduit between foot soldiers and some of the more educated demographics, or could be covert ambassadors on behalf of, like, there's some Duolingo is offering a free blah, 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 like
Well, the point is that those, I mean, I haven't seen any reaction from Taliban to those videos. And obviously, those girls are not showing their identity. And the only thing is, like, some of them, I've seen actually some of them showing their faces too, which is quite interesting. But they are not touching on political issues. They are not touching on
right,
some of the sensitive
right.
um,
They're not
issues.
saying what you and I would be saying.
Exactly. So they're just showing their, some of them are doing online shop
Right,
related businesses,
right.
and they are showing how they start their morning and how they
Yeah, but
package.
there's like, what if they started taking Duolingo? Like,
Yeah.
what if there was in Sri Lanka, there, toward the end of, um, of the genocide there were I don't remember where they were in the peace talks, but they were, like, at a point that was very fragile, and then there was this, bombing in northern Sri Lanka, and, it killed 40 people, and instantly folks were starting to blame the other side, and it risked
Mhm.
the peace talks unfolding, fraying. And this one organization, Search for Common Ground, had trained like 10, 15. They called them digital global ambassadors or something. And it was someone who was like, here's how you put on eyeliner, here's how you make a cake, here's, just doing lifestyle oriented content. And as soon as that had happened, digital digital global ambassadors, whatever it was, went onto their feeds and they were like, everyone calm down, let's wait, let's wait, let's wait, let's wait, no one, don't draw conclusions. 24 hours later, it became clear that it was like a lone wolf acting as themselves. It was not on behalf of like one side or the other, and the peace talks were able to continue as a consequence. And so when I think about the role of particularly girls, I mean, it's a double-edged sword. I get real nervous with, like, girls performing materialism and, beauty and like the double-edged sword of all of this. But they're ambassadors in the same way. They have the same potential to be ambassadors. Not that we would necessarily encourage them to be like, the ICC did this. Like, that would never make sense. But there are interesting ways to bring them into backdoor diplomacy that is not public.
Yeah, that's a very brilliant idea. And I think, I mean, it sounds really good, but I think we have to find that safety net
Yeah.
within which they can navigate. I think it's quite a different situation if you are within, in a peace negotiation sort of
Yeah.
context, to actually use TikTok videos that are quite popular in terms of like makeup tutorials or like cooking and everything, to turn that into also mix that with some political messaging, which is quite smart and can reach a huge audience. But it's another story if you are living under an oppressive regime, like Taliban, whose sole agenda is to suffocate and oppress women. I think then that safety net is something, I don't know in what shape and form and how that could be created, but I'm definitely sure that those videos that those girls make can reach some young Taliban using Instagram, because they do. And that can definitely bridge some of the gaps, and some of the misunderstandings, and can be part of the integration, even if they cannot reach them physically in person, and stop them on the street and tell them about their part of the world, their
Right.
realities.
Right.
So it definitely makes sense, but I think it should start from somewhere, but somewhere safe, and I'm not sure what it would look like, because
It
to be
probably
honest.
wouldn't look dramatically different from what they already do, to your point.
Mm,
It could also, if I think of like content here, it's there obviously most of the content creators are like women, and I do feel like there is so much centered on like home creation and beauty maintenance and just like, but if there were actually, it's really interesting. There's this really beautiful content creator couple. They are Hasidic conservative Jews, and they live in Brooklyn, and it's a husband and wife. And they talk about what it means to be Orthodox, like very conservative Jews. And so they talk about what it means to keep kosher and what it means, like all of the different rules within their religious story. But it's a really beautiful union around the rules. So they dispel any myths, just the two of them dispel any myths that Hasidic marriages look a certain way. Like in a way, they're breaking a story that it's very traditional and very stodgy and very like rule oriented, like they still like watch them like partying to Taylor Swift or dancing to Taylor Swift, but they just don't do it on Friday night on Shabbat or something like that. So it's less about them coming out and talking about what you and I get excited to talk about, and more about the fact that their lifestyle and who they are as a brand is challenging some ideas. Like them just being on Instagram, I guess, is challenging the idea. And I wonder if there's ways that you and I can, secretly be supporting them or
well, I mean, that's I mean, definitely social media leveraging that is a brilliant idea. Also considering the current restrictions. Um, but personally, unfortunately, I must say I'm also not very active on social media. I've been
it's
been
okay.
quite
I'll take care of that for
guilty
you
of
and I.
that. but I think it could definitely
Why
be
don't you
lived.
send me their handles? I would love to just take a look
Yeah.
and watch and follow them for a while to understand what
Yeah.
it is that they're doing and what they're saying. It's really interesting. A lot of the content that was landing, at least in my feed, about Afghanistan a couple years ago was about how beautiful it was. Like really just how striking the country is. And I really appreciated it because it was telling a whole different side of the story that I have not that's not been my headlines about the country for the past 20 years. And it was like, "Oh my gosh, those canyons are gorgeous. Oh my gosh, look how beautiful those lakes are." Like it struck me that like with this breaking of what I believe is this breaking of a world order that like sure, you have the ICC, and I appreciate your note and commitment to the original root of the institution. And the public power of shaming the Taliban, or in our case, Trump, or Xi Jinping, or Putin. Like, that's scarier to some of these leaders than an arrest warrant from the ICC. And so there's a part of me that wants to leverage that more. Um, there's the youth ambassadors like yourself who show up at the UN, and we can't not calculate the role that the influencers who are talking, telling us how to put eyeliner on really beautifully, because it's all so borderless in a way. I mean, I want to know how to get Duolingo into the hands of every single person in Afghanistan, and I'm not invested in Duolingo. I just know that my kid's learning another language on it.
Mhm. Yeah, and when you were talking about how beautiful Afghanistan, it's reminded me of the fact that I for the past 22 years that I lived in Afghanistan, I haven't been able to see much of it and walk freely
Mm,
on the streets. Like I am part of this country, and I am safe, and I'm able to see parts of these beauties. And now I see Western vloggers and also female
mhm.
vloggers going to Afghanistan, proudly going to places that I couldn't walk in, and perhaps today even an Afghan girl is not able to.
Wow.
And that, I mean, they call them Talibros,
I
people.
just started can you tell us quickly what those are? I just started seeing those started to break into my feeds.
So those are Western vloggers, male or female, but
Mostly
well,
white boys.
exactly, white boys going glorifying the beauty of Afghanistan, traveling to different places, glorifying the culture, showing Taliban's hospitality, and Taliban are, proudly protecting them and guiding them through the city, or helping them to vlog their videos, because they want to portray a positive picture of Afghanistan, because now that they are in charge, Afghanistan is secure. And see, the Western vloggers are coming in, showing the reality on the ground. And the only reality is Taliban were the ones that were making Afghanistan insecure. And since you are in power, then of course you have created that so-called security, which is very similar to the graveyard silence and security, for its own people, but perhaps for your picture and for your sort of agenda, you need to have some positive picture going out in the world, and that's the only update Taliban's new version have today. They are an updated version because they know how to navigate social media, how to send a message across the world that probably would make them look differently. And those Taliban, I actually, um, I'm very much suspicious of their agenda, because they are showing a picture of Afghanistan that is not real for its citizens, for its own people, and especially women. And that is actually damaging a lot of rightful claims that Afghan women and generally Afghan people have of the violations of human rights that is happening inside the country, because then they're contributing to Taliban's agenda. And if you have a female vlogger from West going and being quite free and showing herself walking around the city, eating street food, talking to shopkeepers and traveling around, that makes you think then perhaps an Afghan woman have the same rights to do in her country, which is not the truth. And that propaganda is that perpetuated and fueled by these vloggers. And I think that's why it's quite important to also then make sure we are supporting the Afghan vloggers. I mean, even if they are creating content anonymously, but there's a safety net created for them, and they have the right support to actually continue their work, but give the real picture of reality on the ground.
I'm desperately trying to find the handles of these vloggers, and I can't find it. In fact, I'm breaking ChatGPT for the second time today.
Okay.
They're
Yeah.
like, the Taliban has banned Instagram. Yeah, maybe this is it. Actually, we'll go through them really quickly together. Actually, let's do this one. Like, is this one? No, this is like Vogue Arabia. Can you see them?
Yes.
Okay, hold on. Let me try. I make the internet Afghan moms. No, okay. But I know what you're talking about. I'm like specifically looking Afghan identity and diaspora. Yeah, so these are all identity. No, I'm trying to find those like white dudes. Yeah, never mind. I can't find it. But it's like those white dudes who are like sitting in there. I know it's not called a dish dash in Afghanistan, but yes, I hear what you're saying. Okay, Aisha, thank you so much. I did have one other idea for you about and I think you did some anti-apartheid work. Was that you in South Africa? Is that right?
No.
No. Okay. I read so many amazing bios. Uh, but I do have this idea around like truth and reconciliation commissions and like what kind of collective healing that does. And as you were talking about women um, receiving the acknowledgement or the apologies or just like being seen by other women worldwide. One, I have like this dream of doing like another women's summit. Remember the one that Hillary Clinton did in like 1998 or something like that, but doing it virtually. But like I would also love like I wonder if there's like a truth and reconciliation summit where like women virtually can acknowledge first hear and then acknowledge the harm that they may or may not have done, but also participate in the healing of other women just by being recognized. I am spending a lot of offline time trying to figure out what I can do to help support the women in Israel and the women in Gaza to come together to heal. And there's only appetite amongst women to find a way forward. That's why I have no faith in this current ceasefire. But um, what I've what I bore witness to, or what other people have pointed out to me, is that like the first phase just has to be the women acknowledging what the other women have gone through and doing it like pretty extensively over and over again. And so I wonder, that's not a behavior that Americans do well. Like we're still fighting about whose country this is and like what it is that we did to the indigenous here. But Afghan women occupy a very specific spot in our story about women because for the past 20 years, no matter where you fell on the political spectrum, we were very much sold the story that Afghan women need our help. that we have to go and save Afghan women. All the complexities around these stories that we've sort of scratched the surface of this conversation, that it was worth sending our men abroad to save Afghan women, that we were doing it for freedom, that we were doing it for women's rights. And I think there might be a moment for American women because we all know the project failed. I mean, some people could look at Aisha and be like, no, it didn't. Look at Aisha. That was because of us, whatever it might be. But like, we all can agree it didn't work the way that we were hoping and thought it could. That's like a universal knowing across politics in the US. And like, I wonder if there's a moment or an opportunity or a conversation amongst American women to first say to each other, oh shit, we should have listened to her and not just like blindly marched in. But also like a unified moment for us to acknowledge you, and I mean you, the plural you, and apologize. I don't know if that helps anyone. It's just an idea. I don't know if it helps anybody.
That's that's a beautiful thought, but I think what Afghan women need at the moment is not an apology. It's like solidarity and form of action.
Right. I think meaning like, and then how does that translate into sitting down and shutting up and you telling us what to do, what you want us to do?
Exactly. So I think even for me as an Afghan who is out in the world and whose voice can perhaps reach some audience, I think I have a responsibility to be, not only speaking about them and their rights, but actively designing um, actions that can help them, designing projects, initiatives, and classrooms, and reaching out to universities, trying my best to find solutions for them. So I think what Afghan women today need is hope. What they need is means to survival, and I think hope is the beginning of that, and we can give them hope by actually showing our solidarity through. I mean, could be in a political stance, making sure that if our governments engage with Taliban in one or another way for their political interests, they will also negotiate for Afghan girls, and our feminism will not go out of the window just because our political priorities resurfaced, and we have to make sure that they are intact. And I think, yeah, I mean, when it served the political interests of the United States, they sat down at a table together with so-called I mean, with the terrorists who were in the sanction list of the United Nations, which was totally fine. We are negotiating peace. But when it comes to human rights, when it comes to women's rights, we're hesitating to engage. We're hesitating to, go out of that common mainstream narrative we have established, and to actually both politically and then somehow also then logistically make that necessary intervention happen. So I don't know what uh, what exactly the Women's Summit sort of message could be for Afghan women, but I think the most reassuring one is to tell them that you are standing with them and working with them to make sure that they regain access to their basic human rights, and in any sense and form that could be, making sure that they have access to free Duolingo tests, they have access to free Coursera courses, they have access to accredited university degrees. And I think that starts with the basic commitment, and yeah, I think that's all Afghan women need.
Yeah, I wonder if there's like I wonder if there's a moment in that. And maybe it's like a fool's errand and we just like skip over all that because if you are not necessarily feeling like anyone cares to hear from the generation of women who sort of just bought into the story around what our military was doing, I think that's totally fair. But I do think there is a moment, and after we go offline, I'll share the other names of the other folks that I'm talking to that are Afghan women living in Afghanistan who we have been talking about, you know, they were wondering if we could do some more online virtual conversations around like entrepreneurship and how women can build businesses under not under the guise of, but the idea that like this is what they need now. So here comes the Afghan women giving other women specific instructions of how we can show up. So in ways that you just did, but also like we need the $160 Microsoft iPad, you know, to be able and figuring out how to get that in country, which would be over everyone's head, aside from yours, but we need resources for actual SIM cards. So taking that moment, being like, okay, well, we're not going to do this through our military, through our government anymore. We're just going to go around it and do it individually from like woman to woman. Um, so maybe when we jump offline, I can tell you the names of some of the other folks on this front, and they were excited about how we might be able to produce some of these things on behalf of either just with Afghanistan women, women from Afghanistan who are in country, targeting other women in country. And again, this is like so above me in terms of what the safety of this looks like logistically and from a production perspective. We can do it as easily as we did today. But getting it into so people are watching it in cafes in Kabul. I don't necessarily know how to do that. But if I think about like the influencers that are in the country that we talked about, um, if there are ways to have them participate in and like how to grow your business in Afghanistan type thing, like this isn't that like a little bit of the Trojan horse of getting women to be financially independent?
Absolutely. I mean, also then giving them that space and visibility that they need in a safe space would be extremely helpful both to their entrepreneurial journey and personally to their own sort of belief in that they are not forgotten and they are still part of, a bigger society, and global community. And yeah, I think one of the reasons in my platform we are also trying to focus on
Yeah, can
entrepreneurship.
you actually tell us about the Center for Civic Engagement?
Um, I don't know what that is actually.
Oh, I apologize. It has your title as the Center for Civic Engagement.
No, I actually am the founder of the Crisscross Education organization.
Oh my gosh, Aisha, I am so sorry.
No worries.
We've had your title incorrect the entire time.
No, it's fine.
Well, can you quickly tell us what that is? And then we want to quickly adjust your title in here. Will you
Sure.
tell us again, please?
So we created the e-learning platform for Afghanistan in 2022 when the higher education ban was announced. And then following the success of this platform, I established my organization, which is called Crisscross Education, and we call it CCE. It is newly established, but it aims to ensure access to mini diplomas, scale courses and programs.
Do you have a website that I can pull up for everyone right now?
We do. It's actually under construction,
It's
so
fine. It's fine. I can
it
appreciate
wouldn't be
the website under construction state of affairs. It seems like
okay.
it's constant. Okay, but go ahead.
And yeah, so we have. I mean, we have had quite a progress with this German universities to provide online diplomas for Afghan girls. both a master's and bachelor. However, then because of the German bureaucracy, we faced that it's difficult. But at the moment, we have secured 5,000 free Coursera courses and mini diplomas, and also donated tablets that we want to ship to Afghanistan. And at the same time, we are negotiating with some UK-based universities to ensure that they have degree programs in place where students on our platform can then get prepared to get enrolled. And one of the things that we did so far was to reach over 300 students in Kandahar and Kabul province, because most of those students that was within this network, it was like a word of mouth and not announced on social media, because we wanted to protect its privacy and safety. And those students received access to free English courses as preparation for then giving them access to Duolingo test, which is required by university for them to get enrolled. Yeah, our main job is to advocate for accredited degree programs for higher education, Afghan girls' enrollment in higher education, and also then extending it to Afghan female refugees as well in the near future. But I think it's quite a tricky job. It's like drug trafficking, where you have to be quite careful on how you deliver your services, because it's gonna be. Oh, that's Bart CC. Let me share the website with you.
Is this is also part of the program though? Yeah.
No, actually, it's not.
Okay.
So it's still under construction, but hopefully, once we progress, there will be more information added for students.
How much is the tablet?
So we received donated tablets so far, and I think for us to be able to ship that to Afghanistan, we need $80 per tablet for the company that is actually sending that to Afghanistan, because it's a company that transfer technological devices. And I think that is also one of the barriers, because once you also receive the donation, then you're responsible to transfer it inside the country where the donor is not willing to ship the devices. And that financial barrier was the reason we haven't been able to do it yet. But we are still searching, and
is this it?
Yes.
Oh, there you are. Okay. So you really are double downing on getting these tablets into Afghanistan, and that's how are you actually going to do that? You're just going to ship it through the company that ships technology into the country, and just hope it makes it there?
I guess I'm just exposing my strategy here.
Okay, let's not. That's fine. But as long as someone has a plan.
Yes, we have
Okay.
planned, but no resources. That's the problem.
Understood. Okay, and how much are you looking to raise?
Well, it's 200 tablets and $80 per tablet, which is yeah. I think in case we manage to get 200 tablets and $80 per tablet, that's quite affordable for us to then have more tablets delivered to girls. But yeah, the main point is there are institutions, there are organizations, and people who have a generous heart and are willing to do things. And there's only that trust and that sort of workforce that is connected to the people, students on the ground, the people on the ground, and that can actually navigate the logistical difficulties and nuances to establish that smooth delivery of those services. And they need resources, they need support to actually be able to do that. And I guess that's the main barrier for most of you know newly established initiatives to actually do that. But I have trust, as long as we have organizations that are believing in our mission, we will be able to reach a very large number of students, hopefully also in remote parts of Afghanistan one day.
Yeah. Just so we're clear, it's $16,000 for the iPad and the shipping, right?
Yes.
Okay. Got it. All right. Well, definitely let us know when that URL is up, and we'll push it out to the community for sure. I will add it to the show notes as well. And thank you so much for doing that. And apologies for we were trying to be sleuthy on the other side and Googling CCE. And when all of the language checked out
Oh, okay.
for the other title, we were confident to add it, but apologize for that.
No worries. It's not that. I mean, it's not on the top of search yet, but
It will be. It will be one
yes.
day, in the near future. So Aisha, I really appreciate it. And
Thank you.
I think you've offered some really key takeaways, that I'm excited. And again, this is where youth come in, and this is where Saji's like real passion and helping us stay focused on that conversation about how young people in Afghanistan are certainly on the front lines, and are the ones that can help invite the Taliban foot soldiers into the opportunity and the world of curiosity and what that could ultimately provide. And I appreciate you offering hope. And for what it is worth, I'm sorry, we're sorry for however that might be helpful, but I do think it's sincere. I think there's a lot of Americans who feel that way. Um, I'm excited about using you as a means to funnel different kind of aid into the country, outside of the agency work. I know you won't be doing big over the top panels with step and repeats and handouts, and you'll be directly listening to folks on the ground. How's your grandmother doing?
She's doing well, actually. Since the blackout of internet, I haven't had the chance to talk to her, but I asked my mom how is she doing, because the blackout also led to limited access to internet and horrible connectivity. So that's perhaps why she's not able to use that in a village. But as far as I know, she's fine. Thank you.
Well, I'll send you this link in YouTube, and if you want, you can send it to her. But please tell her that I'm thinking of her, and
Thank you.
she and my grandmother could shorten their WhatsApp messages if they wanted, but we love every instant of it. We truly do. Aisha, I will ask you, we're going to end real quick now. Jay, I'll let you handle that, but we'll end. And then if you don't mind hanging on, because I do want to go through the list of some of the other folks who are interested in curating some more specific actions, moments, conversations amongst Afghan women. I would love to run that by you and see if any of that lines up. Aisha, thank you so much and have a blessed day.
Thank you so much.